How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today it's time for some exhaust work on the CRX, so let's roll that intro and get into it. So on the last video, you would have saw that we got a basic idea of what we wanted to do with the exhaust, but we definitely ran out of time in the day. So today we're gonna try and get this buttoned up as much as we can. So I've done quite a bit of work on it on my own already. Basically, I was trying to get the exhaust manifold off and get the exhaust manifold separated from the downpipe, which was a whole afternoon to try and get that done. Everything was seized and rusted on. I broke 2 bolts, which I had to extract, and I had to replace the studs. So that I all kind of did behind the scenes, but this is all good to go now. I got the downpipe on with new studs, and I kind of figured out what I want to do down here, so I got a basic mock-up of it right now. So I just have it supported with 2 jacks right now, just so that I could get the positioning right. But basically, I ended up cutting off this flange. I didn't want to have to deal with trying to line flanges up and stuff, and it wasn't really working out too well anyway. So I'm just going to end up using one of these clamps instead, and I think it'll work just fine for this application. And then we don't have to worry about aligning things too much. And then I actually got this part tacked on. I got about 6 tacks on there holding it in place. And then I got a few more tacks holding the back part together. I didn't want to fully weld anything until I got it positioned, but I think this is where I'm going to kind of want it to be. All right, guys, so here's another look at the exhaust now with it off the car. I have this pipe fully welded now, and I have this seam here on this pipe fully welded. So this section is basically complete. Here's a look at the flanges that we were going to use, and I ended up thinking that this is going to be too much work, because this was originally on here, which I had cut off, and then this is the flange that we found in our parts bin that we were thinking we would weld onto this side. But to find a gasket that's going to work for this and trying to get everything to line up perfectly, I figured that was going to be too much work. So I have one of these clamps. It was kind of sitting around on the shelf, and basically this pipe will just fit over top of this one. This will clamp them both together. Done. Then we don't have to worry about a gasket or anything like that. So the next thing I have to figure out now is the tailpiece. So basically it's going to have to bend 90 degrees. So I do have a piece outside here. This is actually a piece of old Prelude exhaust, but I think basically I'm just going to use this section here. If I cut it off here right after the resonator and weld that onto the piece that I have there already, then I'll just have a nice 90. All right, guys, update on the exhaust. So I got it back mocked up on the car, and I got that 90-degree bend cut, and I tacked it into place on here, and I'm just doing a mock-up now, and I think this is going to work out quite nicely. So it kind of fits the original profile of where the exhaust would bend. And then I think what I'm going to do is just kind of cut it off right here so that it's still aiming towards the passenger side. And then I'm just going to put a bit of a turn down on it, maybe like a 45-degree turn, just to kind of aim it down at the ground, and it should go and exit right in front of the wheel there. So that's kind of the idea right now. Well, guys, here is the finished exhaust. I was able to find a hanger on my old Prelude exhaust, which lined up perfectly with the hangers on the CRX. So I took this 90-degree bend here, I cut it off and put a 45-degree angle downwards, so the exhaust will be pointing at the ground for the most part. So I think it's time that I can put this on the car. All right, guys, so the exhaust is 100% done. I got it all clamped in place. I got a hanger on here now, and the rubber grommets were a little too long for this application, so I cut them in half, and then I have a steel zip tie here and a steel zip tie on the other side of it to keep it butted up against the grommet. And this thing is solid. It is not going anywhere. It doesn't even bounce up and down. Like, if I put pressure on it, it does not move, so I don't think it's going to rattle too much for us. You probably noticed in the previous clips that there was paint on this piece of tubing that I was using. And so this morning I lit a fire outside and burnt all that paint off of there. So now it's just bare metal, good to go. So exhaust is done. But we know this car loves to give us surprises. And while I was fastening the exhaust, I noticed that we were missing a subframe bolt. This one is actually loose and the whole subframe moves. So that's a no-go. So I tried tightening this, and actually the captive nut inside is spinning. And then I tried putting a bolt in the other hole, and the captive nut that should be there is actually missing. So we got to figure that out. I think that takes priority over anything else at this point, is to get this safely fastened. So I think the only option right now is I gotta take the bumper off, take the fender liner out, and then I gotta cut myself an access hole into the frame so I can get to the backside where the captive nuts are. Weld those in and then get some new bolts in there. So it's gotta be done. It sucks, but let's get this bumper off and get started. All right, guys, well, some good news, kinda. So I got this access hole cut here. I wasn't sure how high up I needed to go. I actually could have gone a little farther yet, but I wasn't sure how long the bolt actually was. So before, when I tried putting a bolt into the existing hole, I wasn't getting any thread. Well, I wasn't using a bolt that was long enough. So now that I have access into here, I can see where the threading is supposed to be. So I got a longer bolt now, and it's actually threading in there. So I got lucky with that back one. This one obviously is still spinning, and I'm probably gonna have to cut a bigger chunk up here yet. And the captive nut is still there. So I think all I'm gonna do is weld that in, just a few tacks on it to keep it from spinning. And then I'm gonna see if I can get this loosened up, maybe clean up the threads a little bit, and then we'll put it back. All right, guys, another update. So I ended up cutting the chunk out of here, and I got the first bolt threaded in, and it's actually nice and tight, so it's good to go. This one I could not get loosened up no matter what I did, so I ended up having to cut the whole bolt out of there. So I just kind of have it down here. That's where I cut it off. This is the part that was seized. I tried every way to try and get this loose, and there was no way it was coming loose. So quickest way was to cut it off. Got myself a new bolt here and a nut that threads on nicely. So I think all I'm gonna do, since I have access with a wrench right here, I'm gonna tighten it up. And then once it's tight, I'm gonna add a few tacks to it, call it good. It's gonna keep it in place. I'll make sure that I put some anti-seize on here as well so it doesn't end up rusting the same way that the other one did, and then we should be good to go. All right, guys, well, it's an ugly job, but it'll work. So what I did is I welded the frame back together underneath, ground it all flat so that I could fit these cover pieces back on here. Tack welded them on. I didn't feel it was necessary to fully weld them on. And this welder is such a pain in the butt to use. It's just a flux core, cheap welder, and you kind of get what you pay for with it, but this will work. It's solid enough. I don't think there's a need to seal up any of this because there's already a hole here from the factory. So in case we ever need to take this off again, all we got to do is cut off those tacks and then we have access again. So I'm gonna call this done. All right, guys, so it is a new day. Got Tim here today. He's working in the background, and I've been working on the motor mount for the CRX. So this is basically based off of the factory motor mount, and I basically turned it into a solid mount. So basically this is gonna bolt up exact same way the factory motor mount would, and it's gonna keep the engine nice and solid. So I'm gonna install this now and see how much flex we eliminated from the engine. And then while I'm doing that, Tim is gonna get to work kind of finishing up some of the rocker work back here.
Matt did all the hard work by actually taking the old rusted metal out and putting the new rocker in. So I get the easy work, just doing a little bit of fiberglass to fill those bigger gaps, and then seam seal everything to make sure that it's gonna last.
So anything in here, we're gonna have to seam seal all those joints. Make sure no water's gonna get in, but yeah, this side's just about done. Okay,
What language this is?
Okay guys, so we got another update. I've got the engine mount mounted and it fits in there real nice. So it's basically just a solid mount going off of where the factory mount would have been, and like this does not move at all.
Here, Matt.
You can pry on that a little bit, but we used to be able to move this engine by using barely any force and it would just shake in there. So hopefully that does the trick. I think we're about ready to take it for a test drive. Tim's been working away on this side, getting some fiberglass work done. So this hole is now patched up, as well as this hole up here. And then also everything that we've welded together, wherever there's a seam, we've seam sealed. So we're seam sealed on top in here and also underneath where the seam was. So I think we're all good and sealed there. That's all nice and dry now. So we're gonna get the passenger seat put back in. We'll drop the car to the ground, and then we're gonna take it for another test drive and see how it does. Well, at least we made it home. I don't know if this thing has a limiter, Tim. It just keeps going.
It's got a limiter, we just haven't found it yet.
It'd be nicer if the tack was working.
Yeah. It's so loud.
That's ridiculous.
We'll find the limiter yet. I think I found the limiter when I drove there, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe, I can't remember.
At least we were wearing earplugs then.
Or we?
We had earplugs last time.
Wow.
Alright guys, so as you could probably tell, the footage that you just watched is extremely old. It's probably about a month and a half, maybe 2 months old already. And the reason for that mainly is because we were pretty well ready to run the car as it was by the end of that footage for racing. And what ended up happening is they had to postpone the race by another month. So what that meant was we would actually be able to put in some extra time and get the car to where we want it to be. So getting the driver's side rockers finished was a big one. Getting the car sanded, getting all the bodywork undone on it because there was so much Bondo that we had to get rid of. Getting the car painted, all kinds of stuff like that. There was a bunch of little stuff that we needed to do to get it ready. So that's kind of what we did. We didn't spend a lot of time getting any footage for it because it was crunch time. If we were going to do this, we had to put in all of our spare time to get it done. So for starters, yeah, driver's side rocker panel is done. That one was very bad. I ended up having to cut out a decent chunk of the floor, cut out the pinch weld, and the entire rocker is gone. So I had to rebuild all of that stuff from scratch and then weld the new rocker in, which actually went quite well. There was just a lot of piecework and I had to make a lot of patches and stuff to fill in some of the body rust and stuff like that. So it is all finished. It's been rust proofed and undercoated. And then the hardest part after that was trying to get all the panels to line up again after the new rockers were on. So if you remember, the rockers that we purchased were online. They were the cheapest ones we could find. and they're actually for an EF hatchback, not for the CRX. Which means they were a little bit longer and they didn't quite line up properly, so we had to do a little bit of extra fabrication to get them to work. And then along with that, the side skirts and the door panels and stuff like that weren't quite lining up properly either. So we had to figure out a way to do that, which we did. Everything actually looks pretty good on the car right now. Once that was done, then we were able to take care of some other stuff. Like we wanted to get some gauges in the car because the gauge cluster that we currently have is not working. So we installed some aftermarket gauges. After everything was seam sealed after the rockers, we painted over everything on the interior, so it actually doesn't look too bad now. I still want to make some kind of a cover for all of that, for the lines and everything, just so that it's kind of hidden and it doesn't look so ugly, but for now it'll do. And also we cleaned up a bunch of the wiring inside because there's so many harnesses that we're not using anymore. So we kind of just coiled it all up and zip tied it out of the way. So now we have no extra wires kind of just dangling, and it doesn't look so Mickey Mouse. So that was a lot of work. We got the car to the point where we felt like it was raceable. And we were actually never able to figure out the issue with why the CRX stalled on our last test drive. So when we brought it in, it kind of just died on the road, and it took about a minute or so, and then it fired back up again. So not sure what the problem is there. My best guess is that there's probably still some junk in the fuel lines or in the gas tank. So that's something we may have to diagnose down the line. But for now, I think the car is working just fine. We actually ended up painting the car. We have a separate video for that. I'm not going to show you guys yet. And we have raced the car already. So there is going to be videos about that as well. But just kind of wanted to bring you guys up to speed, kind of where we're at with the CRX right now. I don't want to give too much stuff away, but I think this will kind of sum up this video quite nicely. And then we'll be able to finish the other videos, and you can look forward to that very soon. So if you like the video, guys, definitely give us a thumbs up. Sorry it's a bit late, but definitely drop us a comment below. Let us know what you think of the build, if you're stoked about the CRX as much as we are, because we love this thing. And yeah, we'll see you next time.